All right, so yeah, today we're talking about Django Forms. So we're now able to write full stack Django applications. We can write models to interact with our database. We can write views to handle logic, and then we can serve up HTML templates to the end user. So we can now do a full stack application in Django. And one important part of writing CRUD apps is taking user input, and that's typically done not always, but that's typically done through forms. So in HTML form. And Django, it's been around for a while, so it's got a particular way. It's actually got a few different ways, kind of related ways of handling that for you. So if you're writing just vanilla HTML and JavaScript, you can write a form, you write the HTML tags, you fill in the form, and then in your JavaScript, you listen for an event and so on and so forth. Django will, so it's good to know that stuff because that's how it really works. But Django is going to take up the abstraction a couple layers. And so we'll focus today on how Django does that. Okay, so here's the basic documentation for Django Forms. Here's the 4.0, although the Django 3 has.
Ed, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thanks. So yeah, here's the documentation for Django Forms. This is 4.0. This is the most current version. I think for stability reasons, a lot of the challenges are on 3, but you could update that, I think, without any issue. So there aren't any major changes between 3 and 4 that we need to worry about. So here's the documentation. This is actually a good, I would recommend reading some of this Django documentation, not just because it's good to learn about Django, but it's also just, I think a good presentation of general knowledge about forms and HTML and building a web app and all that kind of stuff. There's the general, and then here's the 3 links that you'll want to focus on. So the Forms API. So because everything is object oriented in Django, there's a form class. There's a couple other related classes, but we'll take a look at building that. And then the form fields. So just like the model, this is basically, you'll see that the forms and models in Django are isomorphic. So the way you write a model in Django is going to look exactly the same. Because, and that shouldn't be necessarily a surprise, because typically if you have a table in a database, which is represented by a model, a model, that class model in Django, if you're filling out a form, it's probably going to end up looking similar, right? So if I want to sign up a new user, they're going to enter their email and password and whatever. And that's probably going to be almost direct translation into what I end up putting in the database. So the tight coupling or the high correspondence between a form and a model makes that possible. So it's pretty transparent. So you're not gonna have to learn a new API. Okay, so the form fields, there's a whole bunch of keyword arguments that you can pass. We'll take a look. Actually, we're not gonna really focus on that. We'll use mostly the defaults. But there's also these field classes. So just like when you were creating a model in Django, you'd have a character, like a car field, which would correspond to varchar in SQL, or you have a date time field, or email field, all these other things. So there are corresponding field classes for the form. So there's a Boolean field, car field, choice field, and so on. So you can take a look at those as well. And then the form and field validation. So we've done validation, right? You can do it on the models. You can also do it on the forms. So you can do validation at multiple levels. You can do it on the at the HTML level, and then you can also do it on the back end in the database. And the API is similar for the form validation and for the model validation. So you've already done the model validation, so this shouldn't be anything too surprising. Okay, so that's just the general preview of the documentation. So as you're doing the challenges, that's where you're going to be looking for most things. All right, so what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna start an app from scratch. And it's gonna be a very simple app. It's gonna be like a, Craigslist kind of thing. It doesn't really matter what it is. So we'll have a very simple app, and then we'll have one route where you can display all of the ads, the Craigslist ads, and another route that will give you a form that you can fill out to create a new ad. So the model is going to be very simple, just to illustrate the forms. So to create a new app, I'm going to create a virtual environment, then enter it, and then install everything. Python-m then source activate, and then pip install Django. I'm just going to use the default SQLite database for now. So I'm not going to install anything else. And then I'm going to create a project. So Django admin start project. I spell that right? Either way. Okay. So now I've started a project. So now I have this Craigslist folder, and then in here I have my top level project stuff, and that's it. So I don't have any apps. I'm going to create an app. We'll go in here, and I'll create my I'll create an ads app. And go admin start app and ads. Okay. So I have my single app that I'm going to have for this application, and then I have my main thing. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go into settings, and I'm going to tell Django that I have a new app installed, which is called ads. And like I said, I'm going to use the default SQLite database. Don't have to worry about it. And I'm going to leave the rest of these settings as they are for now. So I have my my top level settings good for right now. So I'm going to go to my models, and I'm going to work backwards. So when you're making a Django app from scratch, there's a couple different approaches. I mean, there's a bunch of things that need to happen, and they're all kind of interrelated. So the order that you do it, doesn't really matter. So you can figure out some workflow that works best for you, or you can just not worry about it and do something random every time. All right, so let's create the model. We're gonna do a class, and it's just gonna be an add class, and that's gonna inherit from models.model. And to keep things very simple, I'll do a title. So models.carfield, and max length will be say 10, and then content models dot text field, yeah. And I don't need anything there, and I'll also add an email field. So email. Yeah, that should be fine. All right, so I've got my model now. So once I have my model, that I've changed, how I want my database to be. So I'm going to run the migration sequence. So make migrations, then migrate. And this will be the first one. So I'm going to get all the default Django apps that come with this. So Python manage py. Okay, so that looks good for now. And so at this point, what we've done before is if you want to add some, some dummy data to get you started for testing purposes, you could do that here. You could go into the shell and do add.objects.creates and add a few that way. But there's another way. You guys haven't talked about the admin console, have you?
No.
Okay, so Django has a built-in admin console, which is another nice feature of Django. So it comes with you, but you have to do a little bit of setup to get it working. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first thing you have to do is create a super user. So this is like the main admin user. So if you have any experience with Linux systems or doing any kind of sysadmin stuff, super user, if you ever do the sudo command before you've done something, then your system has a super user as well that you only use when you have to. But what we're going to do now is we're going to create a super user for our project. And the way you do that, Python manage.py, and then create super user, all one word. So create super user. And then you're going to get some input. So you're basically going to fill out a form. I'm just going to do things that are very easy that you wouldn't really do. So enter for the default, password, very simple. And it gives me a warning here. It says passwords, blah, blah, blah. So I have a bunch of rules here, and I'm just going to override that because I'm just doing some local testing. I don't want to type in the long password. Okay, so I've created a super user. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run the server, Python manage.py run server. And we'll go here. So even though I haven't really set up any routes or URLs, I can go here and I get the default Django page. And there is actually one route that has been set up by default. And I can see that here, it's this admin route. So this comes for free through this admin.site.urls. So I can go to /admin. And here I come to the admin page. Now, if I hadn't created a super user, then I wouldn't be able to get in here. But because I've created a super user, I can log in as the super user. And now I'm here in the admin. And what shows up by default is users and groups. We're not really going to worry about groups, but if you want to have more fine-grained permissions for different kinds of users, you can mess around with that. But here in the user page, I can see, so I have one user right now, and that's the super user that I created. So super user is just a user, but with whose staff status, basically. So I can create another user here in the admin console. So by default, I've got all these restrictions on what kind of password I can have. So when I was creating the super user, I just overrode that. Here, I don't think that there's any way that you can override that. Not that I know of anyway, but you can. One thing you can do, and obviously you wouldn't do this in a real application, but just to show you kind of how this stuff works. Here in the settings, we have all these auth password validators. So there's this list of objects, and we can see that we have all these built-in Django passwords. So we can, it's pretty obviously named. So user attribute similarity validator, minimum length validator, common password validator. And you can see in the requirements, your password can't be a commonly used, must contain at least 8 characters. So we have this, length and so on. So all these things are being applied, and we could add others. And I'm sure there's a way to create your own as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to comment these out. So I've got none of these validators going. And if I refresh the admin page, you can see that all that stuff went away. So again, you wouldn't want to do that in real life, but just to show you that you can. So I'm going to have a very insecure password, and it will actually let me save that now. So I've created another user, and you can see we've talked a little bit about this before. Here's how so that password is not just going to be stored in plain text. It's going to be, so Django is handling this for us. So this is one of the nice things that Django does. It's got this authentication app built in that's going to take care of this. So it's using an algorithm, this SHA-256, and there's a salt, and there's the hash. So it's showing the first part of this. This is visible because we're a super user. Okay. So that's basically it for users. And if we wanted to now create, for example, we have this class, we have this add class. Well, we can create users. Well, why can't we create ads? Well, you can create ads. You just have to have some configuration where you're letting Django know that, hey, admin, hey, admin app, I want you to pay attention to this other app that I made. And you do that here. So in this ads app, there's this admin.py, which got created by default. So you go here, and we're going to register our model. So I'm going to import the add model that we made. So from .models, import add, and then I'm going to register. So you don't have to, it's admin.site.register. This is obviously something you would just have to look up. So admin, we're importing here, and then site register, and then we'll pass in the ad that we want to register. I refresh. This development server has hot reloading, so I don't have to stop it and restart it again. I'm going to refresh the admin page, and now you can see that I have access to this ads app. So now I can click on here, and I can add, through the GUI, I can add some ads. So some content, and then email. Another one. And I can see that I've created new ads, but how can I improve this situation? Add object to add object 1.
Understring.
Yes. So I'm going to go into my models, my add model, and I'm going to override the default string implementation. So def str. I can do whatever I want. I'll return a title. And now if I go back here and refresh in the admin, I get something that's a little more useful to me. Okay, so that's the admin terminal. So now we have access to the admin terminal. I'm gonna switch gears, and we're gonna actually build this out now. So I've got some dummy data that I would be able to see. So I'm gonna go back and build out my routes. So I want to have two routes. I want to have basically a list view. So I go there, I go to the ads, /ads, and I could just see all the ads. And then I want another route that gives me a form that I can fill out to add a new one. Okay, so I'm going to go first off my top level URLs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new path. It's going to be ads. So if anyone goes to whatever my base route is /ads, I want them, I want this top level URLs to hand off to my apps URLs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import this include. I'm going to say, if anyone goes to ads, I want you top level URLs to hand off to my apps.urls. So it's app or ad, sorry. So if anyone comes in on this path, just pass it off. So this ads.urls would be here. It doesn't exist by default, so we're going to have to create it. So we're going to create this urls.py. And then I'm going to import, just like the top level one, from Django.urls, import path. All right, let's see. Django.urls, import path, that should be right.
Gotta start with from.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay, so I've got this path, and then I'm going to have my URL patterns list. And I'm going to have a path. And I'm going to pass it three things here. First is the path after /ads. So I have, www.example.com/ so it's going to come here, and then I'm going to go to /ads. So example.com/ads, it's going to hand off to this URLs, and then I can just say, I can have nothing, which will just be /ads, or I can have other routes. So I'm going to just leave it as nothing for now. So this route will handle /ads, just /ads. And I'm going to pass it a view to call. So if you come through, actually, I'll just rename it for the purposes of illustration. So list all. So if I come in, I go to example.com, I come here, I see it's example.com/ads, I hand it off to here, example.com/ads/list all. It's gonna hit here. So it's gonna hit here, and then from here, I want to call a particular view, which I haven't created yet. So I'm just going to say list all. I'm going to have to write that, and then I'm going to give it a name so I can refer to it later or elsewhere in my app if I need to. You don't have to include this last parameter. And then this list all I haven't created, but this is going to be our view. So from .views import list. Okay, so my routing is now set up. So I have to write my view function. So I'm going to have a view called list all.
I got a question, Jason.
Yeah.
On your import statement for .views, what's the significance of the dot?
It basically just means it's in the current.
Okay.
Yeah, it's at the same level.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I've got list all, and what's the parameter that a view function is going to take?
Request.
Yes, so it's going to take a request object. And then it's going to expect me to return a response object, ultimately. And there's a few different ways of doing that.
I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Continue. On the request, in the views folder, for the request, sometimes they have the little dash in front of it, which I know it means that tells the user that they won't be using this request, and sometimes it don't. Does it really matter?
Like something like that, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a couple, so like in initial underscore, so if I did something like this is often used for methods. This basically will indicate a private method. So this is mostly used in classes. So Django doesn't really have private methods, but in other languages like Java, for example, if you have a class, so class, my class, and then I have, my init and whatever, and I have some method, so def, I'll call it intern method. So I have some kind of internal method, and then def so for example, I have a class and I expect users to kind of interact with this a particular way. So here's like the useful method that a user would call. And I'm going to do return. So here's the thing that I want a user to use, and this is just some like helper method or something like that. That I don't really expect anyone to invoke directly. You can mark that as a convention in Python with an initial underscore, and this is not enforced by this is not enforced by the language. So you can still access. You could do my class dot my class instance dot underscore internal method, but you shouldn't. So this is basically just telling other programmers, hey, this is just meant to be used within this class. And then here's what an external consumer would actually use. So that's the main use of the initial underscore. You can also have things like so here's a list comprehension. So for something in, let's do 0. So if I want to create a list of zeros, so basically I just want to create 10 zeros. So I don't really care what this value is. It doesn't really matter to me. So you can just basically, it's a convention. You're just telling other developers, I'm not actually using this, but I have to have it here just because it's a requirement. It's a syntactical requirement, but I'm not actually going to use this value anywhere.
Okay, thank you. I always wonder what that underscore in the list comprehension meant. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So you could just have a normal kind of variable name, but it's just like, so I've created a variable and I'm not using it. So here is just a way of telling everyone, hey, I know, I'm not using this, and I'm letting everyone know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So list all, and so our view function is going to take a request as it always does, and it's going to return ultimately some kind of response. So what we want for the list all is we want to return HTML that shows every ad in our database. So what are we going to have to do?
Create a variable, the whole list. I think what it is, books.objects.all.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to have to get all of our ads. We're going to have to interact with our database, and we do that through our models. So we're going to have to get some data. So we'll call that ads, and that is ads.objects.all. And since we're using add, we're going to have to import it. So from dot models, import add. Okay, so we've imported add, and now we can get all of our ads right here. So what is ads going to be?
List.
Yes, basically. So it's going to be a query set, which is basically a list. So we have a list of ads, and we have all our ads, and now we want to somehow create an HTML page that has all of our ads in it.
Return a render with data, dictionary data.
Okay. Return render. So we have this render function, which is actually, if you take a look at the documentation, it's actually a convenience method that kind of does several things. So you'll find in general with Django that there's like, it's been around for a while. So there's like 5 different ways of doing everything. And sometimes it doesn't really, it might not make much of a difference which way you do it, but it's usually kind of as it develops, it gets more and more abstract. So it starts out with kind of lower level functionality, and then that gets packaged up into higher levels of abstraction. So render is kind of a higher level abstraction that does a few other things, but you could kind of break this down and do all the steps individually, but we're not going to worry about that. Just to let you know, you'll see this pretty frequently as you're dealing with Django and looking things up and looking at examples. There's lots of ways to do the same thing. So for example, here with the views, one basic thing is that we're using functions for the views, but Django also has classes. So there are class-based views that you can also use that we'll look at in a little bit. So don't let that throw you off. Okay, so return render. So render takes 3 things. It takes the request, and it takes
HTML document.
yeah. So it's going to take a path, or kind of a relative path. So we'll do ads, and then this will be the list .html. We can call us whatever we want. We haven't created that yet, so we're going to have to create it. And then the last thing is a context object. I'm going to go ahead and create that here. It's going to be an object, and we can, give this whatever key we want. We just have to be consistent as we use it. So I'm going to say, let's call ads to keep it simple. And that is our query set here. So I'm going to pass in my context. So that should work now, except that I have to actually create this HTML. Does anyone remember how to do that? What's the kind of Django way of doing that?
Create a templates folder.
Okay, good. So in my app, I'm going to create a templates folder.
Inside that folder, create an ads folder.
Right. So you have this redundant naming, and then from there, I'll do list all.html. I'm just going to start off with this just to let's make sure we've gotten this far all right. So I go to /ads, I believe. Let's see. /list all. Okay, so there is our page. So we are rendering this with this context. So now I want to show all of the ads. So how can I insert all the ads into this HTML document?
Format.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
In urls.py, I was getting in the habit of doing views dot to get to that view, do you not need to do that?
You can't. It just depends on how you want to import stuff. So I could do. I mean, I could do import
Oh,
everything
okay.
in there. Yeah, it's basically.
Okay, yeah. Got it.
So then if you do from dot import views, that should work. So yeah, a few different variations.
Thank you.
on import. Okay, so here I've got my HTML document. Let me see if I can pick on someone. Melissa, can you, so I have my, HTML document, and I have this, my view, which is gonna basically take this context and shove it in here and create my final HTML thing, and it's gonna send it. So how do I utilize this context inside this HTML document?
So you would need to access whatever information you want out of the dictionary, I believe.
Yes, good. So I'm passing in this context here, which is a dictionary, and the key is ads. So I don't know how many ads. I maybe I have 0 ads, maybe I have 100 ads. I don't know. So the first thing I could do is I could just do ads. I could try doing that. And it kind of works. I get something here. So these are my 2 ads, but I don't actually want to do this.
Create a for loop, huh?
Yeah. So
Parentheses, take the other.
yeah, so here's where we get into the weird syntax for the Jinja or Django templating language. So there's the parentheses with so the brackets with %, and that's for basically functions. And then there's the double brackets for values. So we want to loop over something. We want to pull out every single ad that we have here. So for add in ads, we want to display the ads. So we start the for loop. We have to end the for loop explicitly. Again, you don't need to become an expert in this templating language. And then we'll do add dot title. I'm going to wrap this in HTML. Let's do okay. I refresh this. I have I'm just grabbing the title. I could also grab the email and everything else. So we'll just do that to be thorough. I'll make this a paragraph. This will be okay. So I have my ads. I'm not going to worry about styling or anything like that, but we have our content now. Okay, any questions about this? So in our list all route, we grab everything from our database, every ad from our database, we wrap it up in an object, we pass that object into the templater, which is kind of an all-in-one render method. And then here we will loop over the ads, our ads query set, which is basically a list, and pull everything out and create the corresponding HTML. Okay, so once we do that, I think we're good there on that route. So we want to have another route now. So not the list all, but let's say the create route. So path, I want to do I'll just call these, make these very explicit. So views dot and then create new and the name that I can reference later. Okay, so I have that. So I'm going to have to go into the views. So def create new, which is going to take a request object. And then here, so what's the difference between my create route and my list all route, or one difference?
It's gonna
We
be
don't
an
need the
HT
all.
It's gonna be the opposite of what the first one is. The first one's a response, so that's gonna be an HTTP. It's gonna be a post instead of a GET.
Yes, exactly. So so this is handling what kind of request, basically?
So that's a GET request, and
Yeah, exactly. So the list request or this view route, this list route is going to be GET requests. The create new route is going to have to handle post requests. It's also going to have to handle GET requests, because the first time I go to this page, I want to go to whatever / create new, which doesn't exist yet. I want to go to create new. The first time I go there, I'm not making a post request, right? I'm making a GET request because I need the form. I need that initial form in order to fill it out so I can make an actual post request. So we're gonna have to handle GET requests and post requests. So we'll have to check the request method. So if request method. So if it's a post request, we'll do something. If request method get, we'll do something else. Let's handle the GET request first. So this time, we also want to serve up HTML, but we want to serve up HTML with a form in it. So we need to make a form. And we can do that just by, we could make our own form just in the HTML and do it that way, but we're going to use Django. So the form API, I would recommend taking a look at this, but we're going to create a form class. I'm going to create a new file here in my ads. It's going to be called forms.py. So from Django.forms import. Actually, yeah, I'll import forms. Django. And then this is going to be almost identical to the model. So I want to create a form for the ad, basically. So class add form. And I'm going to inherit from forms.form. So this form, just like models.model, I have forms.form. And then I need to tell it what fields there are, basically. So we have so I have my form here. Okay, so I want a title, and that's going to be forms.character field, and I can also pass that a max length. So I'll use the same here. So this will be validation that happens in the HTML, and then content my form. So models dot. Now you would think that there would be like a corresponding text field, but there's actually not. Oops, sorry, getting confused here. So if we look at the reference here, so form fields. Let's see. So what we're actually going to end up using is a widget. So widget is basically just like some HTML. So we'll go down here. Where is this? So we have the Boolean field. We have the car field. So the default widget is text input. And let's see. Yeah, I guess it doesn't say here, but if you did some more digging into this, you'd realize that you have to have a widget. Let's see, and that will be forms dot text area. So I think that'll do it. That'll give us like a big box basically to enter text, and then email. Should be an email field. All right. So that should be it for the form. And this form is basically, obviously it's represented as a class, but it's just going to end up being HTML. At the end of the day, this is just, a way to write HTML. So let's look in the views. So I'm going to create an instance of the form that I just made. So I'm going to import it first. So from .forms import form.
Spell form wrong.
Sorry. Thank you. So I'm just going to actually. Okay, so I have this, I created basically a blank form now. So I'm going to have that form, which is just HTML, and I'm going to insert that into my, my larger HTML template, which I haven't created yet. So I'm going to go here, return, render, request. I'm going to pass in this path here, which is going to be ads / let's call it new. And then context I will create here. So that's just going to be the form, basically. Call it whatever I want. Just call it form, and now I have the context in. So I'm going to go into my templates, go into ads, create a new HTML document. New .html. And h1, this will be the create a new ad, and I'm just going to go ahead and insert the form directly, and we'll see what happens. Let's see, form. So I got an issue here in my view. Or it's in the URLs. Okay, so I just need a comma here, I think. We go to my new route, create new, and it shows up like this. Obviously not very pretty. You can do all kinds of customizations, which we're not going to worry about right now. But so the title is content, and then medienable.com. So this works, and I'm gonna, if I take a look, if I inspect here, I see that. So one question is this a form?
No.
Yeah, it looks like a form, but it's not. It's not really a form. It's the guts of a form without the actual form. So what we're seeing here, this HTML is that form instance that we created. So what we need to do is we have to add a little bit here. So that form is going to give us everything, but we have to create like a wrapper. We have to create the actual form ourselves. So form, and then we can shove this in here. And we also have to include a submit. That's just how it is. So input. So I'm going to refresh this. So notice I have a submit button now. So I can go to add new, and if I submit this, what happened when I submitted this?
Looks like your page refreshed.
Yep, the page refreshed. So what's up here?
Those are the key values from
Yeah.
the form.
Exactly. So this is the, this is the form that I filled out, but it's being passed. So what kind of request is being made?
Post.
It should be a post. But I'm actually making a get request, and this is a query parameter. So it's taking the form that I filled out, and by default, it's putting it as a query parameter. So I don't want to do this. So for example, if I had like a new user sign up and I was, enter your username and password and so on, you don't want to be throwing that up in the URL. So what we have to do is we have to tell the form, we have to mark the form as being a post request. Okay, I'm going to go into the views. I'm going to print out. Let's do. All right, so I'm going to go here, enter a new thing. Try this. Okay, so it's different. So I'm getting having a different problem, which is usually a good sign. So I should be making an actual post request, and you can see that here. I made a failed post request, and Django is telling me that Csrf verification failed. Is anyone familiar with Csrf?
Yeah, we went over this a little bit. On your template, you'll need to add a CSRF token inside the squiggly parentheses.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to add, before we do that, I'll just show you, this is part of, the built-in stuff you get for free. So in the apps, we have this auth and sessions. I think it's the sessions that handles CSRF tokens, but it's either auth or sessions. So it's basically just including, and it's based on this. This is one reason why you have to keep the secret. So it's going to generate, every time you have a form, every time Django sends a form, it's going to include a CSRF token. So if we examine, we'll go back here. You can examine the form, we should have, okay, so we don't have that yet because we haven't created it. So we'll go back here and we'll add the token and we'll take a look at it. What's it called? Is it token Csrf?
I think it's just token without the underscore, isn't it? Could be wrong.
I think it has the underscore.
Yeah, it has an underscore.
We'll find out. Okay, so I've made a new post request. And if I look here, I can see that I have this new field. So I have a hidden input field that Django has sent me. So I didn't include this on the form. Django does this automatically because I've included the Csrf token thing. So I get this thing, and then the value is this. It's called a nonce, N-O-N-C-E, just means like a one-time. It's like a one-time random value basically, and it's based on this secret key that you have. So the application knows like I sent you this form. So you can't come from somewhere else and make a post request if you don't have this value, or if you have, you know, a wrong value, then your instance of the Django application is going to know that, hey, I didn't send you this form, so I'm not going to accept it. So this is just a security feature. You can disable that, but I wouldn't. So just like I disabled the password settings, which you also shouldn't do, you can disable that. You can remove the middleware, and it will prevent that from happening. Okay, so you've got a new thing. So if I try to submit this, notice that the email validation kicks in here because it's an email field. It's not going to let me do that. So I have to have something that looks like an email. Okay, so I get an error here because I'm not returning an HTTP response object. So if I look in the views, I'm just printing the post request. So you should be able to see that here. So here's basically the body of the post request. So I have the middleware token, which Django is going to worry about. So I'm not going to worry about that. But I have the title and the content and the email. So I can pull out all of that stuff. So ultimately, what we're going to want to do on the post request is pull out all the information from the form and then create a new form instance, right? And save it to our database. So we're going to do that, and then yeah, we'll do that first. So there's kind of there's a particular sequence of events to follow. So first you're going to have to check if the form is valid. So if let's see. Let me think. Okay, so what we actually have to do, okay. So here, initially, we created an empty form and served it up. When we check the form, we're going to create another form, but we're going to fill it in. We're going to fill it in with the values that we got. So this is how Django does it. And then we're going to fill it in with the request.post. So here's like the empty form, and here's the filled in form. So once we have that, we can do, I'll just call this filled in. So then we're going to check if it's valid. And that's going to return a Boolean. Oops. And when we call this, we're going to get access to another field on our filled in form called cleaned data. And this clean data is going to have our title, content, and email on it. So I'm going to say, this is our clean data, and we can access it just like a dictionary. So I'm going to do title equals let's see. And then email. For now, I'll print all this stuff. Let's do date. Okay, server's running. Another post request. Okay, I got the error, because I'm not returning anything, but let's check the logs. So we should. Here's what the title, content, email. So we can pull out this stuff. So once we have that, we can create, create an add instance and add it to our dictionary. So I'm going to do add.objects.create, and we'll do title is title, content, and then email is email. So I will save this to the database, and then the standard pattern is if I make a post request and I make a post request and then I get redirected. So that's a standard pattern that you do. So we're gonna redirect.
I have a quick question about the object,
The
add object. Like
yeah.
instead of, after we do the data clean, instead of doing the title, content, email, can you just do add objects create title equals data.title like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So you could just say, instead of this, you could do dot or. So you could do that as well.
Is essentially the clean data method that's just stripping away that CSRF token and all that extra data that gets added.
Yeah, so this is checking. So you can override this just like with the models. So you can have your own custom validations and everything, and it's going to check if it's valid, if it makes it through the validation, including your own custom stuff. If you want to add it, then this is gonna return true, and this is gonna be available. So once this is available to you, it's basically an indication that you've gone through this validation process. So you can now trust this data.
Okay, because it looked like once we got that object back the first time, the token and everything was included in it, and we want to take that out before we pass it into the database.
Yeah, it doesn't. It wouldn't really matter if the token was included or not. I mean, yeah, because you wouldn't include it in the database. So we don't need a token in order to create an ad. So you just, even if it was there, you just wouldn't use it. So that stuff is taken care of behind the scenes through the built-in Django middleware. So the Csrf token really has nothing to do with an add instance.
Quick question, Chip. I'm sorry.
Is that the question you're asking?
I was just wondering what the actual clean data method is doing to it.
So this is basically just it's not a method. The clean data is kind of, it's what is left after you check if it's valid. So I check that it's valid, and then I have access to this property, which is basically, here's the data from the form, but now it's trustworthy.
Okay, I understand now. It's not a method, it's a property of
Yeah.
what came out of the is valid. Okay, that makes sense.
Sorry, was there another question?
Yeah, is it just, I would expect to see an error because it was getting request, you're creating new instance of add form.
Yeah.
And it's getting request.post, and it has 4 key value pairs, title, content, email, and the token at the top. Does Django but our form only has those 3 bits of data, right? So I would expect it to throw an error to say you gave 4, but we expected 3, but is something going on under the hood where Django just kind of expects that to happen?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. That's a great question, and I don't actually know the intimate details. So you could, I mean, we could look around in the source code and eventually figure it out. But that's one of those the Csrf token. That's one of those things that's kind of handled. You don't usually have to worry about it when you're making an application. There's a separate app. It's built in. It's kind of there's a parallel system that's operating. So all of this middleware. All this middleware is basically just like you can think of it as like a bunch of filters for your request object. So a request comes in and it's going to pass through all of these different things, and your request object is going to get checked and modified, and things will be added or changed or whatever. So it's going to pass through all these different stages, and then if it passes through everything, it's going to ultimately show up here in your view, and then the reverse can also happen. So as you send it back, you can go through all that middleware.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't, when you created that token, didn't it add what they call it, a hidden
Yeah.
form field? So that would take care of
that. Can you say it again?
Yeah, he was basically asking that we're returning 4 things, but we only had three input fields on the form, but we actually have 4 now, but one of them's hidden, right? That
Yeah.
token.
Yeah. So it exists, but Django is obviously aware of that. So it's not, we don't have to include that in our where is that? We don't have to include that in our form. We don't have to include a Csrf token. So I don't know the details of how Django does this, but we don't, yeah, that's not something you have to worry about. Okay, so we've got our form. So we've filled out our form. We can successfully create something new in our database, and then we have to redirect. So I'm going to, I'm not doing any error checking here, obviously, but just to wrap this up. So I'm going to return redirect. So there's a redirect function built in, which is from Django shortcuts, just like render. So we have redirect and redirect. So here's where you can pass it basically one of 2 things. You can pass it a string, so like a URI, or you can also pass it a named route. So that's one reason why you might want to name your routes. So I'm going to redirect to this list all view. And in order to do that, I have this reverse function that you give to list all. And I believe, where does that come from? I think it's Django.urls. So when someone submits a successful request, again, I'm not handling errors or anything, they're going to get redirected to the list view. So let's see if that works. So 6.6. And so that successfully saved, and I got redirected, and now I'm looking at the list view with the new value there. So this is the basic pattern. I'll also show you one variation. So this is kind of, so as I mentioned with Django, there's multiple kind of levels of abstraction. This is at the lower end. So we have to fill out the form, and then we pull out all these individual fields, and then we save the instance and so on. There's another higher level of abstraction that we can use. Instead of using the form, where's my form? Instead of inheriting from forms.form, we can inherit from something called a model form. So this is another.
My quick question, when you
Yeah.
added that, when you did the add, did it update the database also?
Yes, it updated the database, which is why I can see it here, and we could go in and check that in the admin terminal as well. Let me see, I think yeah, I broke this temporarily. Let's go back here. Okay, so I'm already logged in, and if I go to the ads, I can see that there's that new ad
Okay,
saved successfully.
so that's done behind the scenes also, I'm assuming.
Well, so that is done. That's done here when we create it. So this is just the normal API that we use to create.
Gotcha.
So you created it, it saves to the database, and then when it saves to the database, we redirect the user to this list view, which then gets
So it's
everything
kind of
in the
like
database.
the insert statement.
How's that?
It's kind of like the insert statement in SQL when we did the add object create.
Yeah, exactly. So we've done this, but we've done it on the, on the command line or inside the shell.
Gotcha,
So instead of doing it in the shell, we're actually doing it in our code.
gotcha.
All right. So the models, yeah. So I'm just going to show you another alternative. So instead of inheriting from forms.form, forms.model form. And this is going to be a little bit different. So it's actually going to take another, there's going to be an inner class called meta. And even though it's a class called meta, it's basically just, you can think of it as just like another object. And then it's going to need two things at minimum. It's going to need the, what is it called? Model. And we'll give it adds, which means we're going to have to import it. So from .models import add. And then it's going to need the fields that you want to show up here. So title, content, email. And that is some kind of iterable. It could be a tuple or a list or whatever. So let's do. All right, save that, and it should work the same way for now. Okay, so so that also works. So it's the same thing, right? We're just using a different form, but the advantage here, or I guess the advantage here is that there's even more built-in functionality into the model form. So I can eliminate all of this stuff. I can check if it's valid, and then I do filled in form dot save. Back to, and that works the same way. So there's a little more magic happening. It's a little more abstract. Yeah, that's how that's working.
I noticed in the example, on the page, he actually put the add form class in the views folder. So it can go either or.
Yeah, so you can put this stuff anywhere. I mean, really, for something like this, since there's only one app and it's very simple, you really don't even technically need an app. You could just do everything. You could do everything here. I could do all the URL stuff here. I don't need to refer to anywhere else. I could put the views here. So yeah, this is a lot of this is kind of convention or just for the sake of organization. But yeah, you could put everything just in one big file, but I wouldn't recommend that. So this is like this is a standard convention. You'll see forms and models, and so I would do it this way unless you have some good reason not to. Okay, so we have two alternatives that both accomplish the same thing. We have the forms.form, which is kind of a lower level thing, still more abstract than just writing all the HTML yourself, and then we have this other thing, this model form, which gives us even more magic. Okay, any questions about that? So I'll post this code, or I'll post a link to it so you can take a look at it. All right, so I'll stop now, stop recording.